welcome to Procurement Pivots, the podcast for procurement professionals wanting to navigate change successfully and create career success on your own terms. I'm Donna Bowden, procurement career coach and founder of Narrate Your Career.
And I'm Laura Sellers, executive coach for procurement and founder of Coaching for Procurement. And between us, we bring almost 25 years of supporting and working with procurement professionals. And it's fair to say we've navigated many of our own career pivots along the way. And now we're here to help you do the same.
Each episode will share practical strategies, honest conversations, and expert insights to help you confidently tackle the changes and challenges in your procurement career.
Let's get started.
Hi everyone, welcome to our latest episode on the Procurement Pivots podcast. We're delighted to be back once again with all of you. So thank you to all of you that are regularly tuning in, watching, listening. It's great to have you part of this journey with us. And so today we are going to be talking about the benefits of storytelling in various different aspects of your procurement career. Do you want to kind of share why we picked this topic, Laura?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone, welcome back to this week's episode. We did a poll on our LinkedIn page for the Procurement Pivots podcast, and it was the most popular topic, and that was chosen. So, it's on you guys, you chose this one. But it is definitely something that comes up in a variety of ways, like not just in one dimension, I would say. For me, with the conversations that I have with my clients, it's more from a storytelling internally to try and get internal stakeholders to get on board with procurement's mission in the organisation. What about you, Donna?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes up in a variety of ways actually, but I think it can be internal because some of the clients that I'm working with, it's kind of helping them potentially with some of their progression, etc. internally. But I think it's then also it's very much linked to what is that story that you're telling about yourself, who you are, what you bring, etc. So a lot of it is linked to how you're positioning yourself for what's next. So what is the story that's kind of a future telling story, not just I've done this and this and this, the past. It's actually kind of linking it to wherever it is you're hoping to get to next in your career. But I
Yeah.
couldn't, I mean, I run a business called Narrate Your Career. So I do a lot of work with my clients around, particularly their own story, like how are they developing a story that showcases all their kind of, uniqueness and brilliance, etc. I can't have a business with that name without kind of storytelling coming up very regularly, I would say, in the work that I do with clients.
Yeah, and I think, like we're saying, there are different aspects to this, and it's not that you need to learn a different story for every aspect of that. It's
Mm.
about the skill behind storytelling, I guess, and how you can adapt it to different stages of your career to use as a career development tool, but also as an impact tool, as a leadership tool. So it's definitely a versatile subject and yeah, to showcase the brilliance of what procurement does and and the uniqueness of each of the procurement leaders that we work with and the team actually as well. I do a lot of teamwork so around this and influencing the business. So yeah, there's definitely it's a wider reaching subject than just on an individual basis as well.
Yeah.
So,
And I think picking up on that word impact, which, obviously it comes up a lot in these episodes, it comes up a lot in the conversations that we're having in kind of, coaching sessions. Storytelling is just such a brilliant way of having an impact on
yeah.
others. Typically those that are able to communicate using some kind of storytelling kind of method, it can be so much more engaging, more memorable. It's and I think that's the thing. It's kind of, how do you get your message, whatever that message is, across in a way that it lands well with people and they resonate with it and they remember it. And
Mm,
and I think, I mean, obviously, a lot of the work I'm doing with individuals, it's supporting them in job moves, whether those are internal moves or external moves. Um, but I think often, people will introduce themselves using quite an outdated style of kind of introduction. It's very descriptive. It's, often very long-winded. It's, I did this, then I did this, then I did this, then I did this. But actually, um, that doesn't cut through, particularly in a really competitive job market. Like that isn't, it's not always memorable enough, particularly if everyone else is saying the same thing. So I do think, kind of whether it's internally with stakeholders or internally with people that might consider you for promotions or different opportunities, like actually it's just such an amazing kind of skill to develop for
mm.
yourself, and particularly um, as you're kind of maybe moving up the ladder, or you've been in your career a bit longer. I think it senior execs don't have lots of time to listen to lots and lots of information. Like often they just want a snapshot and they want that kind of that message to be delivered, very succinctly but impactfully. And so it can be just such a great way of kind of showcasing that.
Yeah, and I think when I think back over my career to ways of storytelling that were introduced to me, it was more I was given a model, the STAR model. I think
Yeah,
it's quite a
yeah,
popular one, isn't it? And where you can articulate a situation in an interview.
yeah.
But something you just said earlier about executives, I think this is where a lot of us fall down, um, without planning and preparation is because, as you said, senior executives sometimes just want a snapshot. And sometimes when we have our own communication style of the story we want to tell, it doesn't always align and match with the person we're trying to sell the
Mm,
story to. So something that I would definitely recommend is really get to grips with what your communication style is and what the communication style is of the person you're trying to sell your story to.
mm,
And this is applicable whether it is you're looking for a new job, you're positioning
yeah,
yourself, whether you're trying to get a stakeholder on board. But basically, I think understanding where you need to capture their attention, because where I see a lot of tension between stakeholder relationships with the procurement leaders I work with is when there's a mismatch in
yeah,
communication at that level. So, for example, if you've got somebody who's very results driven, wants the snapshot, they might be of an understanding where they just need to know, just tell me what you need, or tell me what you did,
mm,
tell me what the problem is. And if you're a process driven person who loves the detail, that can be really hard to summarize. So yeah, that's where I would personally start, is looking at my own communication style or the client's communication style and who it is they're trying to sell the story to. Does that resonate with
yeah.
you?
Yeah, absolutely. And coming back to the STAR technique, because I mean, the STAR technique comes up a lot in the work that I'm doing with clients. And obviously, a lot of them are, they are setting themselves up for what's next. And so we're doing a lot of work around kind of interview coaching, etc. But I think, what I've seen from working, I've been working with senior procurement professionals for I think it's 12, nearly 12 years. And when people communicate, like if you take that STAR model, situation, task, action, result, most people talk a lot about the thing that they've done, the thing they did, but the bits that often get missing. And if you were to ask my clients, like what words come up really frequently, like we end up talking a lot about context and impact, and the whole thing with the storytelling. Like I think so many people, their communication is stuck in the the T and the A part. So, actually, when they're introducing themselves, they're saying, "Oh, I did this, I did this, I did this." You look at someone's CV, it's a list of things they've done often. But for me, that bit at the beginning, like it's an S in the situation, but I often will refer to it as the context. Like if you don't know the problems that led to that thing needing to happen, you can't understand. Like, and that's the storytelling bit. It's the like, what was the before? What was the what's the middle part? What's been done, and then what's the impact? But I think yeah, that's where often, like, it's often the stories I think do fall down because if people don't understand the context of why was that even important, like, why are you even telling me you did this thing? Like,
Mm,
it's the sometimes it's like the complexity or the sensitivity or the political nature of this scenario that makes it really impressive and
mm.
yeah, and I think it often gets missed. So yeah, when you mentioned the star technique, I wanted to just mention that because I think just through those stories, whatever scenario that story is in, like really do think about like how are you setting up that story so that it's going to
Mm.
actually relate to the people that you're talking to.
Yeah, great one. And actually, I brought the star, and obviously you've talked about it. Should we actually say, if anyone's not familiar, what it stands for?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so so we've got situation, right?
Oh,
Then ta sorry,
task, sorry.
task,
Yeah.
yeah. Then action, and
And
then
then
result.
result. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. And I mean, definitely from an interviewing perspective, like businesses, so some people interviewing will have had formal training on how to interview people in the business, and the
mm,
most well documented and well recognized way of answering competency based interview questions such as the ones that come up really frequently. Can you tell me about a time where you've worked with a difficult stakeholder? Yes, probably there's lots of stories around a lot of the time. Can you tell me about a time where you've identified innovation in the supply chain, like in interviews? Yeah, I think yeah, the STAR technique is really important, but actually it can be used as just a general
mm.
storytelling framework as well.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's an adaptable tool, isn't it? So, yeah, I think that what you said about context there is really interesting because sometimes we get pulled. If you think about marketing techniques, there's an element of an emotion in the storytelling, the impact that it's had on
Yeah,
people, because if there was some stakeholder frustration and then this is what you did and this is how you
yeah,
did it, this is who you worked with, that also helps because some people do buy into that emotional language. They get pulled by the emotions rather than the process, don't they?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and sometimes that can be a bit of an uncomfortable topic to tap into the emotional side of things that if we don't speak to that sort of language, so if we don't
yeah,
relate to it. So that's definitely something I was thinking of when you were talking about that with the context.
yeah. But I think also, and I know we've spoken about this previously, but there's not many chances in life where you get to talk about yourself and your career. Like you're so I think, there's so many aspects in which storytelling can be really beneficial throughout
Mm,
your career in procurement. But even just having the chance to like share and download, almost like just not share it because it's an interview or you're talking to a recruiter, but just having that opportunity to just go, really kind of, what is my story, and just be able to kind of confide in other people. Now, that doesn't necessarily need to be a coach, like even just having the chance just to say things out loud. Like so many clients that I talk to, actually very early on, like sometimes even in the first session or two, like they're talking about things that they've never ever shared to another
mm,
person. And actually, like it can be great to say some of these things out loud because sometimes, we just we're so busy, we don't give it thought, and like self-reflecting can be good, but also then involving other people as well and just sharing it, getting their view, etc. So yeah, I think just also, I think there's the storytelling to influence others, but also for your own benefit, it can be really, really helpful to just talk about your own career with another person and kind of, hear yourself talk about it out loud and,
Mm.
be questioned about it. I just think it just can be really, really helpful.
It can be really helpful. And I think, like you said something earlier about how we don't always talk about it, or we take for granted maybe some of the things that we've delivered because it's come naturally. We've been doing it for a long time. So it's definitely a good opportunity to take stock. But what if you're a person or who doesn't like to showcase themselves,
Mm.
and you don't like to say those things out loud? It sounds showy offy, like if that's, I think we were talking before, if that's a word.
Yeah.
Um, but if you're a person who wants to show what they've delivered, but the thought of putting yourself on the stage really in a different
Yeah.
way to what we spoke about when it came to networking and stuff, what about that? How do we get over that hurdle when we want to showcase our abilities and what we've delivered, but we don't necessarily feel comfortable being in the spotlight? How do we get
Yeah.
around that?
I mean, I think this is a really, really common topic, I would say,
Mm,
actually, and particularly in the work that I'm doing with individuals, they're positioning themselves for whatever's next. And
mm,
so many brilliant procurement leaders are really uncomfortable with talking about the things that they've done well. So I think there are lots of different things you can do. Actually, we spend quite a lot of time together working out what the story is. So
mm,
we do quite a lot of work around like really I suppose analysing kind of high points in their career and those projects that they were most proud of, and we're kind of looking at a whole set of things that they've done and delivered and trying to see where the trends are, where the patterns are, where the themes are. So it's working out the story together, but sometimes even that itself can still feel quite uncomfortable. So often we'll be looking at what others' feedback has been or the social proof aspect. So rather than saying, "Oh, I'm really good at this," it's kind of, and I think it's actually the how can you show these things rather than tell? Like the telling can sometimes feel, some people feel like it sounds like they're bragging. So it's how can you show it rather than just say it, so that it's people can see that it's genuine because you're demonstrating how it happens. That might be through, it might be that you've become known for solving these particular types of problems internally, and that always comes up, kind of internally with your feedback. So it might be that you're showcasing others' feedback of you rather than
mm,
saying, I'm a brilliant problem solver. You might reframe it and say, I'm really proud that stakeholders consistently comment on how I've been able to help them solve their problems.
mm. Yeah, I really like that aspect because it's good for building the confidence of the individual, actually, to say, what consistent feedback have you had? What do people
Mm.
say about you? And this might have been in the form of 360 feedback, which
Yeah,
a lot of the time when I start working with people is that they've had some 360 feedback and they want to build upon it, and I think it's definitely something that can help build confidence, but also show you something that you might not have known was there about what you do well and do consistently. So that's definitely an important part of it as well. And I think to be able to, back to the question I posed, it can sort of take the pressure off a bit to say, "Oh, this is actually what other people say about me. It's not just me
yeah,
blowing my own trumpet, you
yeah,
know." And I think as well, turning the conversation a little bit into the how you sell this internally as a story about what procurement have delivered. There's a lot of talking about what the team have delivered and how we've been
mm,
adaptable to the needs of the organization. But you said the word earlier, social proof. When you're building procurement
yeah,
as a function within the organization, a lot of the leaders I work with, they're taking their procurement function to a place it's not been yet in the organization. So
yeah,
there's still a lot of internal selling that needs to do. But last year I was working with a team and we were talking about the journey of the team that they'd already been on to recognize A, how far they'd come, but B,
yeah,
how they could use that as part of the social proof that you
Mm,
mentioned to sell that to other functions within the
yeah.
organization. Because when you're looking at it from an internal perspective, we need to be mindful of the influence that some of our stakeholders have on other ones of our
Mm,
stakeholders. How can we leverage that? How can we orchestrate that? How
yeah.
can we get the social proof of what we're already doing well with one function to sell that story to help us sell ourselves into the other one? So I think when you said social proof, it just reminded me of that aspect as well. That if you're not one to go, yeah, okay, I've achieved all this, because it
Yeah.
can feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
there are other ways of doing it, to
Yeah.
bring in the team aspect, to bring in the social proof of what others are saying.
Yeah. And I think also, coming back to that point, a lot of people are concerned that they're going to appear as maybe being arrogant in what they say or that they're bragging. But talking in facts as well,
Mm.
when you include some facts, it's you're just telling the truth and you're including some kind of factual stats or metrics in there. That's not bragging because that is what actually happened, whereas actually when you don't attach the fact to it as well, it can feel like it could be interpreted as subjective, and that's your perception of who you are and how you operate, but actually it's looking at um you know what are the most impactful kind of facts that you can
Mm.
improve to back up that story that you're trying to tell. But I think, going back to your early point, like it's not like one story is going to work for everyone, and it's really working out like who's the audience, who's listening to this story, and why are you using it, and actually, what facts are going to resonate most with that particular audience. So
Yes.
um, yeah, I think like even a lot of the work I'm doing with people is helping them, position themselves for what's next. But when they land that new role, actually, we then start looking at, well, what are the things you can do in advance to set yourself up for success in the new role? And, who are the different types of people that you're going to be meeting, your peers, your team members, senior stakeholders, leaders, etc. Like, actually, what are those different versions of your own story? Because,
Mm.
your story is your story, but how can you slightly adapt that? Because you're going to be, in those first few days, weeks, and months, you're going to be kind of wheeled out and introduced to so many people in the business. And one of the first things they're going to say is, go on then, tell me a bit about yourself. And it's not an interview, it's not like having to prove necessarily, but you do want it to be impactful. And we know that
Mm.
that first interaction can determine kind of how future interactions go. So, like, really, again, planning and thinking, I'm going to be meeting these different types of people. How am I going to introduce myself? And just really quickly give a snapshot to my story. It's not tell your whole story, but what's your kind of 30-second, 60-second version of a quick introduction going to be, and how are you going to adapt it for those different types of people?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you don't know, obviously, if you're meeting stakeholders for the first time, like you say, you might get wheeled out to a few different people when you're starting a new role. I love the way, we say that, but it can be the case, but it can be the case. You get to know the business. So a couple of things I would suggest here for anyone who's wondering, well, how do I adapt it without knowing what that person needs, is that if you have access to any colors from personality profiling, if that's DISC, if it's insights, if the company's done a company-wide exercise, you might have some data there where you can say, right, this person's a red, this person's a blue, this person's a green or a yellow. That can help you to sort of already try and tailor, okay, well, this person seems to be of this nature. Um, then I will tailor my story to that. So I think that's a really good place to start if you have that information available. It's not always there. It might be there, and you might not, you might have to ask them for it, that. And I had a client who said, well, it's a bit much, isn't it, to go and say, oh, can I have your personality profile, please? But actually, if you're to say, look, I'm really keen to get great stakeholder relationships. Here's how I like to communicate. Would love to know what it is you need from me. How
Mm,
do you like to have that information delivered? And once you've got a bit of a picture of what your stakeholders need, then you can start to tailor what story you need for each one.
yeah, I think
And again,
actually that's such, sorry, go on.
no, go, no,
I was going to say that's such a good point around just having that open conversation about communication styles. Like
yes,
that, um, that doesn't happen enough, actually. It really doesn't happen
yeah,
enough. And,
no,
I think that can just, that can really that can be game changing, I think, actually, for the relationship when you've had that early conversation, whether it's a stakeholder or even, whether it's a new boss that you're about to start
yeah,
working with. And,
yeah.
I kind of that came up actually recently in some work I was doing with someone before they were starting in their new role. And, we were running through kind of, actually in those first few meetings with your boss when you arrive, like what are some of the things that you would love to kind of gain from those conversations? And I just think there's so much power in having that as an open conversation from the beginning, actually.
Definitely. And one of the best line managers I've had two great leaders I was fortunate to report into over my career. That stood out particularly for me. I've had some great,
Yeah.
sorry, I've had some great leaders across the board, but two in particular who I really felt really championed me. One of them, a really simple question that she asked me when we first started working together was, how do you like to be managed?
Mhm.
And it is such a simple, powerful question because it showed willingness that and knowledge that not everybody responds to the same type of leadership. But also it
Mm.
was just a wow, that yeah, that it helps you to feel already quite empowered and quite free
Yeah,
to be yourself.
yeah,
So, and that's always stayed with me when she asked me that because it was really game changing to go, "Oh, okay, I get to have some empowerment here, some freedom." So it is, and like you say, open communication, as you said earlier, it's so powerful. Sometimes we
mm,
overcomplicate these things. We think it's a dark art, and actually part of what we help to do in the coaching, I think, is to actually strip it back and ask those simple questions.
mm,
And something like that. How I always say, how do you like, what approaches do you like from a coach? What would you like me
yeah,
to do? What, and we continually have that conversation.
yeah,
But I think in a storytelling perspective, to ask your key stakeholder, because ultimately everybody wants to be listened to, everybody wants to
mm,
be heard, ask them, what would you like to see from procurement? What would you like to hear from me in terms of updates? Powerful,
yeah,
powerful
yeah,
questions.
yeah, absolutely. And the part that I mean, one of the parts that we've not really got onto is also, what are the stories that we're telling ourselves as well?
Yes.
Because, that's a whole nother can of worms that we're not going to have time to go into kind of in detail today. But, I just, again, we have spoken about this previously. I think particularly when we did I think it was the identity episode, actually. It's
Yes.
kind of,
Yeah, most likely.
what are those things that we're saying to ourselves and how is that affecting us? And actually, that can be, we can be telling ourselves really positive stories, and we could that actually affects us really positively. We can be telling ourselves, those other stories that really kind of allow the doubt to creep in, and
Mm,
that really kind of erode your confidence. So I think it's just, actually also I think getting clear on how you're going to position your story to others and really believe in that story. That's the thing. It has to be genuine, authentic. But I think when you've taken time to work out, like, what is my own story? I think then you start telling yourself that
mm,
story as well.
yeah.
I'm just gonna, like, just an example. So when I think it was last year, um, and I was about 5 months into the business, and I was at an event, and just I had this light bulb moment that, I'd been a recruitment leader essentially for 20 something years, had pivoted myself, set up the business in career coaching. But I was still going around 4 or 5 months later saying, my new business, I've moved into career
Mm.
coaching. Like, actually, I've been informally coaching people throughout my career, and the work that I've been doing, it was almost like in my mind, like both outwardly to others and internally, I'd kind of labelled myself as new business owner. And actually, that's not very that doesn't build your confidence. And I was kind of
Mm.
talking to all these I was at an event, and I was talking to other business owners, and I just picked up on, when I introduced myself to quite a few of them in a row, I just realized that my introduction was very much, oh, I've just recently set up my business. And from that day on, I've been so conscious to not be so outwardly leading with that, because actually, the work I do now is off the back of 20 something years of work that I've been doing to support people in their careers.
Yeah.
And fine, like, I was employed, then I had my own business, but actually that's kind of irrelevant because I've been, helping others in their careers for such a long time. But I just think those stories that we tell ourselves and that we maybe share with others, kind of almost sometimes unknowingly, that can have a really big impact, and sometimes like not positively as well.
Yeah, that's such a great point. A great story, Donna, because like you said earlier, and I was it the identity episode we talked about? I'll have to go back and check, but where we talked about how nobody starts from scratch. You know,
Yeah,
you might have started a new business, but everything you've done up until now is part of who you are. And I love to bring that out in the client conversations that I have, because even though you're in a new role or you're in a part of procurement that you've not been in before, you're not starting from scratch. Let's remember what your strengths are,
yeah,
because there are clues to this. There will be an invisible string of patterns that work well for you, and that's part of your story. But also, if you do have that belief, and I do a lot of beliefs work with my clients because it's about reframing them. We all hold beliefs about ourselves that are good ones and that are bad ones, and we listen to the bad ones so much more than the good ones.
yeah,
And I think it's about reframing the bad ones. It's about calling them out. I said,
mm,
okay, this is a belief I've either picked up from somebody who's told me that, or I've just decided was a thing, because of something that didn't feel so great. It's about reframing it. So, I, I'm gonna so, use your example, but also identify it with something of mine. So, I've been in business for almost 3.5 years now, and I often say, I'm still new to this in a sense of I'm still learning. I always love to
mm,
learn. I have a learner mindset. I always want to
yeah,
learn more. So but like you say, it's part of your story. It doesn't mean that I'm new to coaching now. I've been doing it for a long time, and same as you, was informally doing it for a
yeah,
long time before that. But I think I can still, if I still believe that I am new, it's because I'm not new because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm new because I'm a learner and I love
yeah,
to still learn. And if I'm not learning, I get frustrated in my career. So
mm,
I'm always like, new book, please. I've got like two loads of shelves here. I'm always going to be learning more. But what I would say, just to tie it back, is about bringing that back into concrete evidence, where you said about data earlier, and bringing
mm,
back into testing these learning strategies, because that story you might have might continue to evolve as time
yeah,
goes on. So I think that, as we said, it's a bit of a skill. It's a bit of
mm,
a skill set, but it's definitely something that is a very powerful one. And the stories we tell ourselves are a huge
yeah,
part of that too.
yeah. So I suppose to conclude, I mean, I think understanding your own story in relation to how you're positioning yourself to others, for me, is so, so, so important,
Mm,
particularly, in the world that we're in right now. It's a competitive space internally and externally.
yeah,
And the only thing that is truly unique about you is your own story. Like, no one else has that story. They
yeah,
probably will have shared experiences, etc. But pulling together and really understanding and believing that story that you're telling, that's unique to you. And that's the kind of the key things. I think just, understand what your own story is that you're then going to share with people, and maybe practice kind of how you share it. And I don't mean like a, really like salesy kind of elevator pitch style. Like it needs to feel conversational, but
Mm.
you know, think about the different types of people that you come into contact with and the different scenarios. And you know, a lot of the time they're going to say, oh, do you want to introduce yourself? You know, actually, what is that introduction in those different scenarios? And that's your story, but how are you going to adapt it in different scenarios? And sorry, if I can just add in, Laura, just finally, the when it comes to the STAR technique, you know, that's a formal framework, but I would just encourage everyone to think about in your communication, are you also showing the context and the situation up front, and also the difference that your action made? Like, you know, people are, oh yeah, I follow the STAR technique, but often they don't. They go really quickly to the thing they did, but
Yeah.
actually setting the scene, it helps. Setting the scene helps people understand the, you know, the kind of size of the challenge that you were facing.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I think the context bit is really helpful. So just to build on yours then, a takeaway for me then from having that, I guess the skeleton of the story, that because that is the uniqueness
Mm,
about you and everybody's got that unique story. There is the element of, right, how do I adapt that to the people I need to sell that to? So we're not having lots of different stories. It's just about, do I need to be shorter and snappier with this person
yeah.
who prefers the headlines? Do I need to go more into detail in this scenario, for
Mm,
example? So that's definitely something I think, and part of being adaptable is great procurement leadership as well. You know, I think it's something that's often said, but to build on that as well, that's social proof that we talked about.
yeah.
So we talked we you said about the context was really important. That's where the data and the social proof comes
Mm.
in, right?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So again, we could talk for hours, I'm sure, about this topic. I'm sure it will come up again in future episodes. But as we've said before, you know, if you're listening to these episodes and you're sat there thinking, because we're covering a lot, we're packing a lot into a really short
Mm,
conversation, and we're kind of throwing out some things to think about, but if you're ever sat there and thinking, do you know what? Like, I'd like to explore that further with some help, with some support, like reach out to either of us, or even
yeah.
reach out. Like we've had a few people get in touch with us, and you know,
Mm.
and so you know, it might be obvious that it's one or the other. It might be a combined thing, but you know, don't just sit there and listen and think that there is no help and support if you would benefit from kind of doing some of this with, you know, with support alongside you.
Yeah, and you make a great point there about, you know, we both have our own businesses. We obviously have procurement pivots together, but we're
Yeah,
both very good at knowing what that person needs. So we've both referred people to each other, haven't we? If we know
yeah,
that what they're looking for, actually, you need to speak to Donna or you need to speak to
yeah,
Laura. Actually, this is something we could do together. And we've been getting inquiries like that too, haven't we?
yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely something we want to help with. And ultimately, I think something that we would both say, particularly when it comes to coaching, is about meeting our clients where they are. Like everybody, as we've said, you've all got a unique story, and it's our job to meet you where you are. And we'll, knowing what I bring, what you bring, and what we
Yeah.
bring separately, what we bring together, come and have a conversation with us, and we'll be able to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, thanks everyone. It's yeah, great that you're joining us for these episodes. So
Yeah.
we will look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, thank you. Take care. See you next time.
See you later. Bye everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to Procurement Pivots. We hope today's episode gave you actionable tips to help you to continue to move forward in your procurement career.
If you enjoyed the conversation, follow our episodes, share them with others, and please support us on our social media channels for others that might be interested to tune in.